Hello, welcome to the City of Boulder ballot measure overview presented by the League of Women Voters, Boulder County. I'm Stacy Johnson, volunteer member and voter service director for the League of Women Voters, Boulder County. For today's presentation, the panel consists of Judy Mars Dixon, our ballot issues coordinator for the Boulder League, and Judy's fellow team members, Peggy Leach and Deborah Hayes. Helping us with Spanish language interpretation is Rosabelle Rice and Kelly Music, and assisting us with the Spanish language recording is fellow league member Molly Saunders. For those in the audience not familiar with the League of Women Voters, we are a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights. And we also work to ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. To remain nonpartisan, the League never supports or opposes political candidates or parties. Although we are nonpartisan, we work to empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy, education, and through litigation at the local, state, and national levels. This presentation during the time slot of 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. will cover the City of Boulder ballot measures that will appear on the 2023 ballot for voters residing in the City of Boulder. Following this presentation, there will be a county and state ballot measures overview from 3:30 to 4 p.m. And then at 4 p.m., a ballot measures overview for community members in Superior and Louisville. Today's forum does not include any outside speakers who are in favor or who are against any of the ballot measures that will be covered. The presenters will take a few minutes to explain each ballot measure, and then they will address questions submitted through the chat as they conclude their ballot measure presentation. To get us started, I now turn it over to Peggy Leach, who will cover ballot measure 2A for Boulder voters.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Ballot issue 2A is a sales and use tax extension referred by the City Council, and it extends a current sales and use tax of 0.15%, 15 cents on a $100 purchase for 20 more years, beginning in 2025 and continuing to the end of 2044. So half of that revenue would go to the general fund, including fire and emergency services, public safety, homelessness solutions and services, parks, and other general fund services. The other half goes for arts, culture, and heritage purposes, including nonprofits, professional artists, public art, and related programs. And the funding can be either direct funding or grants. So part of the background on this, there was a citizens initiative to dedicate the entire 0.15% tax extension to the arts, and that received enough signatures to be placed on the ballot. The city proposed an alternative option, continuing to allocate the tax revenue exclusively to the general fund. So then the council and the petitioners agreed on a third option of splitting the revenue between the arts and general fund. And council voted 7-2 to support this compromise. The city's total sales and use tax is 3.68%. This 0.15 tax, originally approved by voters in 2003, makes up less than 4% of the total sales tax. This tax is expected to raise around $6.7 million in 2025 and around $7.25 million in 2024. And this is about 1.3% of the total city budget. Those in favor say voters should extend this tax. The city can't afford a reduction in revenue if it wants improvements in housing, transportation, and other priorities. The 50-50 compromise avoids pitting arts and culture against other community priorities. Dedicating 50% to arts won't necessitate cuts in other city spending because the city will no longer be sending general funds to the library. This frees up more funding capacity for the arts. Those opposed say voters should not extend this tax. The city's 2023 library budget of $9.2 million will go to zero over the next few years. The city will be okay without extending this tax. And dedicating revenue to arts and culture means that in the event of pandemic, flood, fire, or recession, the revenue could not fund more immediate human services and safety needs. This ballot issue should fail so the city can put it on the ballot in 2024 with all the revenue going to the general fund. So are there any questions on this issue? You're muted.
This is Stacy. I don't see any questions from the chat at this point.
There's some messages from Molly and me.
Okay, so shall we go on to the next issue? I'll introduce Judy for that next issue.
Thank you, Peggy. The next question is 2B. This is an elections administrative charter cleanup, and it's referred by the City Council. The proposal is to amend 5 sections of the charter. The first simply clarifies that those who want to sign petitions in support of mayoral candidates or council candidates do not have to do so in person. The second section, 37, is amended to remove the language that is confusing in terms of those working to submit an initiative. It clarifies that the initiative process for a charter change is governed by state law only, while the initiative process for an ordinance is created by the city government in accordance with state law guidelines. Section 39, the third section to be amended, extends the deadline for submitting signatures to 160 days before an election from 150 days. So it simply gives people 10 more days to submit that petition. The thinking is that with a little longer time, that it reduces the overtime for the city clerk's office, weekend time to process paper petitions. The last 2 sections, 46 and 57, give the city clerk's office 15 days instead of 10 days to process petitions. So the background on this is the city has a charter review committee, and this committee recommended these changes to the city council. Those in favor of this say that it will increase efficiency, decrease cost related to overtime, etc., bring city into conformity with state law, and that Section 37 in particular clarifies the charter process and avoids the problems that have occurred recently regarding differing advice from city attorneys. Those opposed say that Section 27, the first section that I talked about, could, if we didn't change it, nudge citizens away. Could, if it passes, nudge people away from social engagement, such as petition signing parties, as we're trying to move away from COVID. The opposers say that expecting staff to be available during working hours is reasonable, and it's good customer service, and that the in-person signing could prevent challenges to the validity of signatures, which apparently is happening in a current Longmont mayoral campaign. So that's to be. Any questions? And I am looking. Oh, I don't see any. So with that, I'll introduce Deborah, and she'll talk about safe zones for kids.
Thank you, Judy. Boulder question 302, safe zones for kids, was put on the ballot by Citizen Initiative. The group is called Safe Zones for Kids, and they want to amend an existing Boulder law that prohibits tents, temporary structures, and propane tanks and other objects on public property unless the people wanting to use this equipment have obtained a city permit. And what the amendment would do is add a new paragraph that would direct the city to make school areas a priority. To be more exact, it makes a priority to remove items from areas, quote, within 500 feet of a school and within 50 feet of any multi-use path or sidewalk. The city may use signage or other notification methods to identify those boundaries, unquote. This law, the law that's being amended, was first passed in 1992, and it just said you can't have tents and other temporary structures on city property. Then 2 years ago, in 2021, people were concerned about the growing number of encampments of homeless people. So City Council went ahead and added a second paragraph to the 1992 law to extend the prohibition to all public property. They also added propane tanks to the list of prohibited items. Propane tanks are, of course, a fire hazard. There was a concern about theft. And then in March of this year, a series of tent fires along Arapahoe Avenue near downtown sparked tension over encampments in the area. 2 of the fires impacted Boulder High School students. One fire was on a multi-use path, another was near the high school's sports field. So this group, Safe Zones for Kids, which had formed several months before in late 2022, created a petition to the city asking to have safety around Boulder High School addressed more seriously. And members of this group met with city and school district leaders, but they didn't think they received acknowledgement that our children are a vulnerable population deserving of special protections. The group was concerned about the 72-hour warning before encampments are removed. Then, since they didn't get satisfaction, they collected enough signatures on the second petition to place this question on the ballot. Those in favor of 302 say this proposed amendment just codifies into law the priority of schools and paths. It signals to the Boulder leadership that the community supports their efforts to prioritize the safety of kids. They say the city has not yet prioritized the safety of students around schools or the paths that they use, as evidenced by the exploding propane tanks requiring student evacuations and the routine exposure to needles, illicit drugs, harassment, and kids being blocked on the path. The proposal is not intended as a solution or a strategy for addressing the myriad challenges that face those experiencing homelessness. It is a public safety measure for Boulder's children. And I think everybody has seen all the letters back and forth and op-eds about this. Another group of proponents say it's not just Boulder High School. It's a lot, there are a lot of places in the city. People opposed to 302 say safe zones like this have a track record of failing in other cities. And they point to Los Angeles, Chico, California, Portland, Oregon, and Austin, Texas. The opponents say the measure disperses enforcement across the entire city and weakens it because the ballot language includes within 50 feet on both sides of any multi-use path or sidewalk. They say enforcement only measures divert resources away from better policies, evidence-based policies to address public safety and homelessness. And they cite the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. They say 302 repeats existing city laws without really changing the approach. The camping ban is already enforced. The schools are already on top of the priority list for clearing encampments. They say the proposed amendment, and in fact the whole law, is a cruel alternative to providing decent housing for the homeless. And finally, those opposed to 302 say the 72-hour notice is required because of the U.S. constitutional protection against search and seizure. And also city policy is to clear propane tanks and other hazards immediately. So are there questions about 302?
I don't see any, Deborah.
I don't see any, no.
Does anybody have questions about the previous ballot measures that were discussed? Okay, there's a question that came through the chat. What is the position of the police department about safe zones for kids?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they've said. They of course will enforce whatever the city policy is. Maybe one of the other panelists has an idea. I don't think they feel it's their role to comment. But I will certainly look for look into this. Any other ideas, or maybe one of the viewers thinks has an idea. So do we adjourn till 3:30 or so? Well, we can close down this segment.
Okay, if it's okay with the panelists, I'll just proceed with the closing portion of this presentation, and we'll be keeping this Zoom session going to move on to the other ballot measures for county and state and Louisville and Superior. Okay, so to wrap up this presentation covering the City of Boulder ballot measures, I would like to thank Judy Peggy and Deborah for their work in supporting voters and their preparations for today's forum. A huge thank you also goes out to our 2023 election sponsors, Elevations Credit Union, Christina's Luxuries, Gigi and Company Pet Products, Wolfgang Boulder, Riggs Consignments, and individual sponsors, C. James Levitt, Simmons Family, Laura Holloway, and Maria Dolores Young. Please note this presentation will be available on the League of Women Voters Boulder County website and the League's YouTube channel later this week and through Election Day. The presentation will also be available on the League's online voters guide, vote411.org, where voters can find information on candidates, candidate responses to questions curated by the League, and information on other ballot measures. We also encourage the public to visit LWVBC.org for more information on all other upcoming forum events, including candidate forums. And finally, I would like to thank you, the viewer of this presentation. As a League member, I like to stress the importance that elections are our chance to stand up for what matters most to us and to have an impact on the issues that affect us, especially issues impacting our communities, our families, our loved ones, and our future. The League of Women Voters believes in empowering you, the voter, with straightforward information so your voice will be heard. Thank you for attending this presentation and being an informed voter.